So, Steve, how much energy does your system produce, and how much do you use at your house?
The system produces a varying amount of power depending on the time of the year, which I kind of mentioned before. The average American home seems to consume about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. And typically my home, because we're very conscious of energy issues in our home, generally consumes about 200, 250 kilowatt hours a month, and maybe a little bit less in the summertime, more in the wintertime. So that's a kind of a target there. I get about 85% of my energy on an annual basis from my renewable energy sources, and then that leaves 15% remaining for a backup propane powered generator.
So, have you kept records of
Yeah, I have
energy production, energy use?
Yeah, on my website I have how many kilowatt hours I've been generating and using. It's a little bit deceptive, and the numbers are probably a little bit low because it's a battery-operated system, and the battery is kind of a limiting factor. One of the ways I like to describe the way we use energy and consume energy in our house is that if you were on the grid, you basically have an energy credit card, and you can use as much as you want, and then at the end of the month you pay the bill. Well, I've got an energy checking account, and my battery bank is my balance. And so I can't use, unless I want to use more, and run the generator, but I can't use more energy than my batteries have. And if my batteries are down low, then I often will postpone things like vacuum the rugs until the next day, or until I've had a little more power come back in. So the batteries are kind of a limiting factor, which is one of the reasons that I often recommend to people that if you're on the grid, you want to stay on the grid. You don't have to have a battery bank if you have grid wires. And if you do have grid wires, then the best way to store your energy is on the grid, and you can forego the cost of batteries, and you can eliminate the maintenance of batteries or any issues of batteries. So it's much better if you're on the grid to stay on the grid.
What's your website?
Website is upwallers.net. That's upwallers.net. And there's a link there for the home, which is on a cliff. We call it the Rock because it's on a giant rock. But if you click the link called the Rock, you'll see a big description of the entire site, the house site, and details for all the energy systems that we have up there, all the specifications, all the hardware, all the configurations, all that kind of stuff is there, including the performance graphs showing you how much energy we produce.
That's great. Because this presentation we're giving is basically on zoning and codes, do you deal much with that? Do you know much about
well, I help people
about it?
I help people install systems, as I kind of mentioned. I help people install systems mostly on small residential units, mostly out of town, mostly off-grid, and there's small-scale systems. The codes are an issue for us, and we try and follow them, but I don't get involved too much with the inspectors at all. That's pretty much up to the owner of the residence. We follow all the local codes that are applicable to the situation, and the manufacturer also has many specifications that we follow to the T, because reliability is a real critical issue, and if you're going to install any renewable energy systems, what you don't want is a failure, because everyone's going to say, see, I told you it's no good. But if you do things right and you're careful and size things properly and wire things properly, it all works.
Speaking of maintenance and reliability, would you talk a little bit about the difference between solar panels and wind machines?
Yeah, it's actually a very big difference, because I have a lot of people that want to install wind energy systems right away and maybe add some solar. And my initial suggestion to almost everybody is start with solar and work from there. First, solar, you can install it in increments, so you don't have to buy a whole house's worth of energy in order to get started. You can buy a smaller system and then keep adding panels as time goes on. Wind energy, you have to get the whole thing. You have to do the site maintenance, you got to pour concrete, you got to put the guy wires up, you need to buy a tower of 120 or 135 feet if you want to get decent wind. And you have to have a fairly big turbine, which means you have to buy the whole thing at one shot. The other issue, as a contrast between the two, is that with solar energy, there's almost no maintenance. The solar panels just lay out in the sun, and every time the sun comes out, electricity comes out. It's just that simple. With the wind turbine, you have moving parts. And when you have a 40 or 50 mile an hour wind, your turbine is up there right in the heart of that high wind, and it's just getting all beat up. I mean, if you can imagine a tornado coming through, your turbine's going to be in a tornado. This is an issue. And I've also found that almost always you have to take the turbine and do some maintenance on it every couple of years, at least. It's either going to be bearings, or it's going to be cleaning blades, or working on electrical things, or brushes are going to start wearing on you, or just the mere fact that things are getting shook and rattled and guy wires are going to start to fray. You're going to have to do maintenance on wind turbines as opposed to solar panels, which just lay out there and get a tan.
We were talking earlier, and you had some great ideas or great advice for people that are concerned about the payback time if they were to put in renewable energy systems, whether it be wind or solar power. But you said some real interesting things there.
Yeah, payback. Well, I've been talking about this for a long time. I bought my first solar panels in the 70s. And so I've been on this kick of renewable energy for many, many years.
You're going to scare some of these people in this class, you know.
But it's been a long time.
If I haven't already.
So this is how long I've been talking to people about renewable energy. And the question often comes up about payback. And I have actually done programs on the issue of payback, specifically on payback, saying that people that are very concerned about payback really are looking for an excuse not to do it. And the reason I say it is this, because if I say how long should it take to pay back, a lot of times they'll say, well, 7 years or so would be a reasonable payback. And I'll say, well, 7 years, so if it pays back in longer than 7 years, it's not very practical to do. And they say, yeah, I wouldn't do it if it took more than 7 years. And so I'd say, all right, so did you pay your electric bill last month? And they go, yeah. And I said, so when do you get that money back? And they go, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if it takes more than 7 years, it's not a good deal. So you must get your money back from your electric bill in less than 7 years, otherwise solar would be a much better deal. And they've never gotten that question before. They've never had that issue posed to them before. So there are several things about renewable energy. One is that it's very simple. It really is a very simple process. You take a magnet and you spin wires around the magnet, or vice versa, you spin the magnet around the wires, you get electricity. That's all there is to it. So if it takes 7 years to do this, well, it'll keep, after you've recovered your first 7 years worth of cost, or maybe more, maybe less, it'll keep doing this. And then once you've recovered your initial cost, then the next 7 years, you recover that cost again. And the 7 years after that, you recover the cost again. I installed my equipment back around the year 2000. It's still running. So I've already recovered my cost. So now I'm in the profit market. And so far, usually people just talk about payback up to the very first cost recovery point, and then they stop talking about it. And they forget that you keep making money after that. And I don't know why it's ignored.
That's an important point right there.
Yeah, it is. It really is important.
It is, too.